Good morning and welcome to this morning's episode of Amateur in the Morning. I am your host, the Forex Amateur. Today is the 9th of October and it is a Friday. So for most traders out there, today is the last trading day, but because we trade synthetic indices, we're in a 24/7 market. We have opportunities to even make money over the weekend, right? But remember, if you've made good profits for this week, make sure that you weigh the risk of having to trade over the weekend against the benefits of whatever you have in your account already. The last thing you want to do is overtrade over the weekend and lose all of the profits that you've been making from Monday to Friday. So make sure when you are trading excessively throughout the 7 days of trading, that you weigh it against the probability of you losing the profits that you've already made for the week. On that note, let me just throw out my little disclaimer there. Remember that even though we cover a lot of charts on these sessions, even though I go through a lot of trade opportunities on these sessions, I am not qualified to provide investment, trading, or even financial advice either, right? Anything that I speak about on these sessions is purely my opinion on the markets, and any trades I take as a result of my opinion, I am speculating with cash that I am willing to risk. So ensure that any trades that you take with cash you are willing to risk, number one. And number two, ensure that you do your own research, you do your own analysis, you make sure you get into these charts and you break them down, and you have been able to make a good enough analysis for you to be able to trade based off of that. So now that we've got all those nitty-gritties out of the way, I'm going to get straight into the charts because this morning's session is a bit late and I want to make sure I get it up on YouTube in time so all you lovely YouTubers can be able to enjoy this little session. So we're going to start with volatility 100 and we're going to then break down 75, 50, and 10 as usual, because as you know, that is my current watch list. As from next week, I'll most likely not be looking at volatility 100 anymore, but that's purely dependent on how it performs over the next couple of days, right? Not really happy with, how much the environment of the market and stuff like that. So for me, it doesn't really appetize me that much. So I might be removing it from my watch list, but we'll see how it performs. We'll see what I can make out of it. And if so, I'll probably keep it. If not, I'll probably remove it, but we'll see what happens. So let's get straight into the charts. Let's talk about volatility 100. As you know, on volatility 100, we have been talking about buy opportunities for a while. Now, I know you're probably thinking this dude is contradicting himself because yesterday he spoke about selling, right? Now, when it comes to the market, it's important to understand that nothing is set in stone. You look at what the candles are doing and you react as a result of what the candles are doing. It's good to have a bias in terms of what you're trying to do with the market, but it's always about reacting to what's happening. You cannot really be in front of price. You have to be reacting like one of those lagging indicators. So in this instance, my look at the markets yesterday did support a sell, right? Because we were getting these strong rejections on the upside. Let me just change this and use my annotator. Cool. So my analysis of the markets yesterday was purely based on this activity that was happening over here, right? I am changing back to my original bias on this market. The reason for that is because remember, my overall bias was that we will get buys off the bottom here. And even though this market was failing to break above this zone, even though it was rejecting multiple times from there, what you can look at, and what I have pointed out on yesterday's session as well, is that it was respecting this overall zone as some sort of a support. So any sells based on this would have been based on it breaking below this zone of support. And as you can see, the market has failed to break that below that zone of support, and it's maintained it. As a result of that, yesterday's candle traded down, and it seemed like it was going to break below, but it came back and it closed very, very bullish. So that is a good sign, and that tells you that we're most likely going to see it revisiting this pink zone to the upside, right? So for today, we are looking to buy volatility 100, and most likely if we do get good setups, we're going to be looking to take this all the way up, right? So looking at volatility 100, we're looking at buys. What I will be looking to see is if we can see this price break above this area and perhaps come back and retest into this area, then it will be a good opportunity for me to look for buys. But for now, this is way too far up for me to even do anything. I'm not going to be looking at taking buys at the moment because they are too high risk, even though the overall momentum is to the upside. The last thing I want to do is be trapped in a possibility of price holding this as a resistance again, right? Because remember, we're still in this zone that price has rejected from multiple times before. So I want to see a trade above, and I want to see a strong bullish candle close above this area. And then I want to see enough activity above this area for me to participate in buys, because then in that instance, the range is pretty good because you can still get a trade in up there, look at putting a stop loss perhaps below this area here, and it's still a good maybe 1 to 2.5 win risk to reward ratio, which is still a pretty good trade that you can look at taking as well. So I'm looking at that on the H4 chart. I am anticipating that this H4 candle will probably close above this zone, and then the next candle will probably look to find support in and around this area of this candle, and then we'll look to see a trade back to the upside. Another thing that you can look at using is perhaps a fib from down here to wherever the high of this candle forms, and then we can look for a 50% retracement in that and look to take a buy further back up to that area. That is another probability, but remember, my highest probability is activity that happens above this zone. So I'll be looking to see what it wants to do above there, and if I can get in, I'll most likely look to take a buy from that area. Now you can see, even on the 1 hour chart, I do have this zone marked up here on the 1 hour. It was basically an inside candle that I was focusing on for possible selling opportunities. Price has, however, broken above it. So this sort of ties in very well. Let me just show this on the H4 chart so you guys can see it on the H4 as well. So if you look at this zone on the H4, you can see that it ties in very, very well with the rejections that happened in on here, and now price has broken above. So even if price comes back here on the 1 hour and finds support, it can be a good high probability buy to take it back up, right? But the problem with that would be this daily zone that we have been talking about that I don't want to buy into, right? So I'll be looking to participate above that daily zone. But if it happens, if we get a good enough setup, then most likely I'll look to take that 1 hour trade, and I'll most likely be looking to take profits at this previous high, because it could be a good retest into the zone where I can put maybe a stop loss below these lows in here, and I'll be looking to target this area again. So that could be a nice 1 to 2 trade if I'm looking to find an entry in there, risking this much and looking to take profits up there. So that's a nice 1 to 2 trade. And if it keeps going, then we just move stop losses into break even at that area, and we let it run for as long as it wants to. Because remember, the overall momentum, when you find a good entry on in the directional bias of the market, it's always a good idea to reduce your risk, right, and pay yourself, right? So if you're trading with a 1 lot, it's a good idea for you to even remove up to 70% of your position, move your stop losses into break even so there's no emotion attached to it, or even move your stop loss closer to your entry. It doesn't necessarily have to be above your entry, because I'm sure in most cases you're fearful that price will come back, hit your stop loss, and then keep going up, right? So you can move your stop loss. If your stop loss is down here, what I like to do is maybe move my stop loss slightly closer to where the entry is. So if it comes back all the way below my entry, I don't really want to be in that trade, especially if my reason for entering is a support on that zone. So pay yourself and then move stop losses. And you know that, hey, even if my stop loss gets hit, it gets hit at a reduced risk. And I've already taken 70% of the profits. Maybe if I was aiming for a 1 to 2 trade, I've taken 70% on a 2-hour trade, which means essentially I've basically already made a say about 50% profit on that trade, and I'm only risking now 50% of what I was initially risking. Does that make, I hope that makes sense, right? My math can be a bit off sometimes, so I stand to be corrected on that math. So let's move on from the volatility 100, and let's look at VIX 75. As I did mention yesterday, that I'm not looking to trade VIX 75 this week, right? Because of how it's moving at the moment. I want to get it to a much more higher probability entry, and then I'm going to look to participate in VIX 75. But let's look at the daily chart for now. You can see that price failed to make a new high yesterday on the daily chart. I did speak about us getting a revisit perhaps into these areas here to the upside. Price has failed to reach that, but it did form a really strong lower high in the market, where it had this lower high and it had this swing high as well over here, which was lower than the previous high. So you can see that price is respecting this overall lower high, lower high, lower high lower low, and we'll most likely be expecting, remember, I did speak about a possible push down into this pink zone before we see this market go long again, all the way back to the upside, right? So overall, possible, the highest probability is that we'll see further sales come into this market, or what we can see is we can see price looking to retest inside this candle before we see it trading back down to the downside, especially since we've got no wick on the previous daily candle close. We could see price come back to gather a bit more momentum before we see it push back to the downside, right? Not really going to speak about this chart any deeper than the daily chart, right? Because I am watching the daily chart at the moment. Or let's just highlight this one zone in here that I'm noticing just off looking at this chart. You can see I really don't have any analysis on this chart because I'm just waiting for that daily chart to speak to me. And once it does speak to me, then I'll be looking to participate in that, right? So we should be looking for price to come into around these zones in here, find some sort of resistance in this zone, and then possibly trade back down. So that would be a good area that I would probably be looking to participate in if I do participate in this market, but I'm not really looking at trading VIX 75 for today or for the foreseeable future. Not foreseeable, I joke. Until I get a good setup on the daily chart, I will not be looking to trade volatility 75, right? Let's move on to volatility 50, and let's talk a little bit about this zone that I spoke about yesterday on the H4 chart. You can see that price came into the zone really, really nicely, and it rejected really nicely. And me and the guys have been kicking ourselves about the fact that we haven't participated in this sell. But hey, it didn't get good enough confirmations on a lower time frame, so I did not participate in this. But you can see it came in and it rejected really nicely off that zone. So when we look at the daily chart, you can see that for me, what I would expect to see happening on this chart for today is I would expect to see price aiming to take out the low of this candle, right? So I will expect price to be aiming to take out the low of this candle and perhaps look to retest into around these areas here to the downside. So perhaps not for today, right? We could see the test of this low today, and then see maybe a rejection, and then perhaps over the course of the weekend we'll see price trading back into this around this zone, maybe as low as this pink zone, and then we'll see those buys back up to this gray zone. I did speak about the probability of this happening sometime last week, so if you didn't catch that, you can go back and watch that episode. I can't remember exactly which episode it was where I spoke about it, but I did speak about the probability of this happening and price coming back into this zone where I am looking to buy from and target this gray zone to the upside, right? Another thing you can look at here is if you grab your fib from up here, sorry about that. If you grab your fib from that area down to this area down here, you can see that price traded really nicely into the 50% yesterday, and it rejected completely from the 50% fib area as well. So in that instance, the next area I would be targeting is the money zone over here to the downside, right? So that also ties in very well with my pink zone that I've drawn in here, which is where I'm looking to buy. And that ties in really well as well with this little line here, which is basically my overall support that I am looking at, right? So there's a lot of confluences for a buy in this area here, and I'll most likely be looking to capitalize off a buy from this zone. However, if I do get good enough confirmations for a continuational sell, then I'll look to participate in the sell if we can get a nice pullback maybe on the H4 chart to around the retest maybe of this trend line, maybe even a retest of these lows in here, then I'll probably participate in the sell to the downside, right? Let's move on to volatility 10. Looking at the daily chart on volatility 10, you can see that it is retracing at the moment. Overall, we are still bullish bias on volatility 10. And as I said, our overall target or any buys taken will be, the overall target will be up here. That does not mean that, remember, I could also highlight interim targets in this zone here. And as you can see, price pulled into it and it's now rejecting. So it would have been a good idea if you were sitting in buys, it would have been a good idea to take portions of profits when you did see price coming into the zone. We don't wait. For me, when I take portions of profits, I don't wait for price to react from the zone. I take portions of profits on price hitting the zone. So the moment, for instance, if this was an area I was aiming to take portions of profits, The moment the candle hits into that area, whether it rejects, whether it closes in the zone, whatever it doesn't matter, because I have to be systematic in my approach, because my approach is a strategy. A strategy is a process that you follow regardless of circumstance, right? So I have to be systematic in my approach. And when price hit this zone that I did highlight in here, because I do recall highlighting a zone, I would have taken a portion of the profits. But like I highlighted, I have not taken a buy. I did take a short scalp on this the day before yesterday to the upside, which obviously did take profit really, really quickly because we are in a buy market. But for now, I am waiting to see if we can get a retest into around these areas here today. Then I will be looking to participate in that buy. I think it's a really, really high probability trade at this point. And I'll look to participate in this buy from around that area back to the upside. Looking at the H4 chart, not really much we can talk about on the H4 chart. As you can see that zone I highlighted on the daily chart falls in and around this area in here. So I'll be looking to see if we can get a retest down there. And if we can, then I'll be targeting that area over there to the upside, maybe a stop loss around down here. And then I'll be looking to take profits up there at that pink zone on the upside, because we've already tested into here. So the next possible area that I'll be taking portions of profits will be at this area here before I leave the remainder of the trade to look for an area up here to take our final target of profits. Cool. So that's it from my side. Not really much that we can speak about on this chart on the H1, to be honest. But I am looking to participate in a pullback on the sell on the H1 because I'm targeting down into this area here. So there's a nice range. I always look at range when I look at taking trades. So if the range is good enough, then I'll most likely participate. If we get a pullback to around these zones or even a retest of this upper line that I have in here, then I'll possibly jump in on the sell, look for a stop loss up there. And the range is pretty nice into here, right? So that's a pretty nice range, a nice 1 to 2, 1 to 2.5 perhaps. So that's a really nice range that I can possibly trade. So that's it from my side. I mean, that's all I really have to say about the charts for today. I will be catching up with you guys again next week. Remember, I only do these sessions from Monday to Friday. I don't really do these sessions over the weekend. The reason for that is because the weekend for me is my time to focus on my trading if I want to trade over the weekend, or to focus on spending time relaxing, taking some time off from the charts, which time off for me really means spending time on the charts. But anyway, that's basically what my weekends are for. So I don't really do any sort of public work over the weekends. So until next time, it's been a pleasure as always to share. Wishing you a very profitable and blessed trading day. And I will catch up with you guys again next week.